What's good, everyone? It's your boy Nati with another video for the channel. Welcome back to DMVSportsZone. I apologize for the delay. I was trying to get my actual green screen up, but after 30 minutes, I failed to do so. But I have a very special guest on the live stream tonight, Jalen Morgan from Bleeding Burgundy and Gold podcast. Jalen, I appreciate you, bro, for being on here. It should be a fun show. But before we get started into the Washington discussion, is there anything you want to plug, or since this is your first time on the channel, if you want to introduce yourself?
No, absolutely. Like you said, Jalen Morgan from Bleeding BNG. I have my own podcast. We're on all podcast platforms. I also have my YouTube channel. So if you search Bleeding BNG, our channel will pop up. You can search my name as well, Jalen Morgan. We have over about 50 episodes so far. We've been going since about early 2021. We also have social media pages. So the handle that's actually in our name right there is actually our Instagram handle, at Bleeding BNG. Daily posts, get the sessions going. I love talking amongst the Washington Commanders community. And then our Twitter page is a tad bit different with the spelling. That is at Bleeding BNG with one G. So that's BLEEDIN BNG. And I love talking amongst the Washington Commanders community on Twitter. They're a riled up group over there, so I love chit-chatting over there. So be sure to follow us, and I appreciate the opportunity for the plug, no doubt.
Yeah, no problem. And I made sure to include the YouTube page link in the description. So guys, go sub him up, get him his subs on YouTube, and make sure to, follow him on all networks. But with that out of the way, I do first and foremost, since it's less than a week since the tragedy, I do want to get your thoughts on the Dwayne Haskins situation, but specifically, what are your fondest memories of Haskins here in DC, even though he did have a relatively short tenure here?
Well, I know a lot of people like to bash Dwayne for like his time here. As we speak about like the Gil Brandt comments and the Adam Schefter tweet. But I actually that moment actually gave me a time to like look back and things like that, because when I was doing a couple of my podcast episodes, I was rather harsh on Dwayne, rather on the field and things like that. But I always want to keep, the humane part of, my analysts and things like that in place and intact. And I feel like sometimes when I was discussing Dwayne, I didn't do that. So it gave me time to sit back and reflect. Because honestly, I was looking back at some of the things you said, giving you one of my best memories of Dwayne in Washington. It's honestly a memory that's more personable to me. Dwayne was actually the first guy to give my page, Bleeding BNG, the first popular athlete to give it any type of recognition. So that'll always be one of the most fondest memories I've had. It was about the Devon McNeil name that he wore on the back of his helmet week 1 during the 2020 season. And that tweet actually, I posted it the day that he passed. And it was actually kind of wild because he was talking about death and things like that, being without his family. So looking back at it, it was kind of like a surreal tweet looking at Punnett. But that was probably my favorite moment, one that was off the field. Being as talking within the realm of the football things and things like that, I just remember being very excited when we drafted him. I know a lot of people were talking about we reached for him at 15, but I remember texting my buddies and was like, we finally got ourselves a quarterback. Now, it didn't work out that way, but who could have thought it, the way that he was balling out of Ohio State. I thought that he may have needed to sit a year, but I thought that he was eventually going to be something in the NFL, and it never turned out to be that way. I did think he was on the path of turning his career around, so this event was rather unfortunate. So it just gave me a time to sit back and reflect. Rest in peace to Dwayne Haskins, though, for sure.
Yeah, rest in peace for sure. And you and me both on the being harsh on Haskins point. I definitely said my share of things on this channel about Dwayne Haskins and his performance on the field and stuff. But like you, I remember being so excited when we drafted him. This was during my first year of college, and I remember being on the lower level watching on the TV, hooking up my laptop, streaming the NFL draft, and it was me and my friend just watching it by ourselves. And I remember there was a crowd of students behind us. And once we drafted Dwayne Haskins, I was jumping up and down in joy. I was yelling. I was disturbing everybody doing their homework and everything. And everybody looked at me like I was crazy. But no, I just remember
quarterback. You thought we had
exactly. He fell to us. He fell to us. There's a lot of talk going into the draft that he would fall, but to see it actually happen, that was pretty surreal. But yeah, I'll always hold that moment close to my heart. And rest in peace, Dwayne. Continued condolences to the family. I know his wife released a statement yesterday. Continued condolences to his family, and I believe he even has a memorial service next weekend up in Bullis High School, where he played in high school. And so that's, I mean, just if anybody wants to go out and support, you have that. But moving, it's going to be hard to transition here, but moving on from the tragedy, I do want to get your thoughts on the Washington Commanders offseason thus far. So first and foremost, there was one piece of news that broke this week for our team in terms of on the field stuff, and that was Joey Sly being extended 2-year, $5 million contract. What are your thoughts on us bringing back the kicker and really the overall lack of activity this offseason?
To start, I'm a big Joey Sly guy. Big Joey Sly guy. That's rather obscure. But well, you may not know, I'm a season ticket holder. And I just noticed once, Joey Sly was brought into the team, I just noticed the energy change that I noticed from the kicker position. And as crazy as that may seem, the kicker net is like right in front of where my seat is. I'm like on like the 25-yard line, about 10 rows up. So I just noticed like the vast difference in energy between a guy like Dustin Hopkins and him. Never mind a guy like Chris Blewett, who we know shouldn't have been an NFL kicker in the first place. But I mean, this guy, I remember his first game, he was fired up. Like he was ready to run out on kickoff. The dude swole, so he looked like he was about to go out there and knock somebody's head off. So I'm a big Joey Sly guy, so I was excited to get that news. But in terms of everything else, like you said, what off season? Like how much of an off season did we really have? I mean, we brought in Carson Wentz, so we did upgrade at the quarterback position. Honestly, I believe that there were, cheaper ways to go about winning, 9 to 10 games, which I think we're going to max out at with a guy like Carson Wentz at the helm, unfortunately. But we did upgrade at the quarterback position. And then, I mean, we didn't bring in anybody that Ron didn't know. All the two outside guys that we brought in, they played under Ron, whether that be in Carolina. Oh, yeah, in Carolina. So, I mean, I don't know. I think it's putting a lot into perspective that guys just don't want to be here. I think that we've tried to reach out to guys when you think about our quarterback race and things like that. I just think that guys like Russell Wilson didn't want to be here. Honestly, Deshaun Watson, regardless of the legal trouble, I think ultimately at the end of the day, he didn't want to be here. And I think that just puts our offseason in perspective. Like it made me realize, and I know I've been in denial about it and in delusion about it for a couple of years, but like I don't want to be harsh, but we're teetering around that poverty franchise level right now in the NFL. To be honest, like guys just don't want to come to us at this point.
Yeah, I agree with your thoughts completely. And with the Joey Sly thing, correct me if I'm wrong, but he's from the area, right? Like
I think he's from like Virginia. I think he's from Virginia.
Yeah. So it's always nice to, keep our hometown, home state, home region products here in the DMV. But I definitely agree with you. There's just a whole different vibe to Sly. One that we didn't really have with Hopkins or especially Blewett, who definitely blew his opportunity here in DC. But and in terms of the offseason thus far, like, do you think with the Carson Wentz move, we upgraded like more than like, where we were, say, in February before the move? Like, if you're talking about obviously the quarterback position, I think we can both agree that's an upgrade. But in terms of the roster outside of quarterback, do you think we upgraded elsewhere?
I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, if we're looking at like the prospects of the 2022 season, I think if the defense comes and plays like we expected them to go to in 2021, I think we technically did upgrade if those guys can play up to their potential. But we didn't really have any outside parts added on. So, I mean, upgrading at the quarterback position, I would say has to be an upgrade. I don't think Brandon Scherf is too big of a loss, especially considering that he's missed, I think, over like 24 games over the course of the last 3 years. So this is the guy that's missing like half a season over the course of the last 3 years. So we could just get a guy that's there for 16 games. While he may not be as talented as Brandon Scherf, I don't think that the loss will be as impactful as if we were missing some other guys that, were all pro level or whatever recognition or accolades we want to give Brandon Scherf, even though I don't think he was playing up to that play when he was getting those accolades, especially the all-pro. He deserved a couple of those Pro Bowls, don't get me wrong. But I don't think a loss like Brandon Scherf would be that big. I do think that we need some depth along the defensive line, Lula Ionitis and Tim Settle. So I do think we took a hit there. But overall, I think with the upgrade at the quarterback position, which is ultimately the most important position in the league, if you're upgrading there, no matter the cost, you did upgrade your team.
Okay. Before I ask my next question, shout out to everybody in the chat that's joined thus far. Patrick West, Viper Old DC. We'll get to the Chris Olave draft connection a little bit later in the stream. Love lifts. Gotcha, Jalen. I don't think that I'm that vocal a fan. Still glad to follow another Redskins Commanders fan. Been a fan for a long minute. Saw all 3 Super Bowl victories in person.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, exactly. if we get one here, man, oh my gosh. But I don't know. Uptown Dre as well, down south. We'll get to the draft talk a little bit later, guys. Dave in DC. Our bizarre leadership front office may scare great players away with all the crazy stories. I agree. We got a good quarterback to make a positive impact for sure. But with the crazy stories and the controversy that's constantly swirling around this team, I was wondering, what are your thoughts on the latest bit of drama surrounding this team, in that for the last decade, Dan Snyder has allegedly has underreported ticket revenue for the investigation that's going on surrounding the organization by Congress. The details: he raised prices and categorized surplus revenue as bogus licensing fees related to concerts, college football games, to prevent sharing with other owners. So what are your thoughts on that bit of news that broke, the last couple of weeks, really? And do you think Snyder is finally on his way out?
Initially, I thought, like I said, I'm a season ticket holder. So I was like, hold on, I'm getting finessed. Dad out here finessing me. But then I read into the reported things. I think that it ended. I think the last year was like around 2016 or 2017. So I was like, all right, I'm in the clear. I'm like, all right, we're good. But honestly, I've been under the impression that Dan is Teflon. Like, it's going to, if Dan goes down, I think he's taking the league down with him. I think Dan has some stories about the league that he can expose. And I think that the league knows that he's the type of dude that, no matter what type of NDA, and I don't even know how the legal ramifications with that goes, but no matter how quiet you're going to get him, he's going to squeal. Like, we just know that, like, he's a dweeb. Like my man Rio says, Dan the dweeb. And honestly, I just think that, he's Teflon. And I just think this is another, and we've seen it. Like, they tried to put his wife in the forefront, and we've seen that we've seen him being snuck into the stadium. I've seen it with my own eyes and things like that. So, I mean, I think Dan is Teflon. So I think that, this is just another, nail in an imaginary coffin. I think that, we all hope so. I'm not speaking as if I want Dan in office. I hope that there is a story that eventually will take Dan down. But I think that he's the type of guy that if he goes down, he's taking the league down with him. Let's just think about those emails. I honestly think Dan's behind those emails. I honestly think he is. But I just think that he's Teflon at this point. And while the story is huge, and he's playing with owners' money, I'm like, I think he got some dirt on him as well. So I think that's just going. It's just a never-ending circle. We're on a hamster wheel for real.
Yeah. Speaking of him being Teflon, who was first to speak at the whole rebranding sort of ceremony that they had? Right, Snyder, Dan Snyder, even before his wife. And I think, to be honest, I obviously I want him to be on his way out. But I don't even think this will be enough, because I think he's just waiting for November to come for Congress to shift red, to shift Republican, and you probably won't have to deal with this anymore, because this whole situation is becoming very politicized right now in Congress, for those of you who don't know. And I feel like, a lot of us predict, that Congress will change over, and he probably won't have to deal with much of this investigation past November. So I think he's just waiting it out, to be honest. And we're stuck with arguably the worst owner in all of sports right now. But
all of sports.
Dave in DC, more opposing fans in the stadium than Commander fans. Then Dan should have paid the other team for showing up.
Trust me, I've seen it with my own eyes. Trust me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. And I guess, like, the next question I want to ask you is, like, how damaging do you think this constant drama is for the on-the-field product? Not just in seasons past, which I think we both can agree that it had a major impact, but also the seasons that come ahead, right? Like, with Ron Rivera here, Jason Wright. Like, how much do you think this constant drama is going to affect the on-the-field performance?
I mean, we heard a guy like Alex Smith just speak about it like 2 weeks ago, saying that, I mean, it's hard to win when you're dealing with this constant drama. And I know a lot of people were harping on, oh, well, that was the old regime. And guess what? The owner is the common denominator in all this. A lot of those stories still stayed the same. So, I mean, it's difficult, but I mean, you have to persevere. I know it's hard, and this is one of the biggest obstacles that you have to persevere over. Like you said, having one of the worst owners in sports. But I think that, like, if you're producing on the field and you're implementing that winning culture, ultimately that's what people are going to care about. So I mean, the win, and I hate to say it, society shouldn't be like this, but winning is going to cover up the stench of a lot of these stories. I mean, and it is what it is, because I know if I see a winner, I know I'm gonna be ecstatic. I know I'm gonna be hyped for football season, regardless of the stories put out there. So I mean, winning cures all. Like that, at the end of the day, that's all I can say is winning cures all.
Yeah, I agree with you. But moving on from the Dan Snyder stuff and the drama around this team, which I don't think will ever go away as long as Snyder is here. What are your thoughts on, or let me ask you this, will this team and should this team re-sign Terry McLaurin? Because, there's a lot of talk about potential receivers in this draft, but we have a receiver here in DC that technically right now won't be here past next season. So thoughts on us re-signing him?
Absolutely. I did an entire podcast episode talking about how we should dedicate or how we should, back up the Brinks truck for Terry McLaurin. Well, I was looking at somewhere with a 4-year deal, because I think that we seem to forget that Terry's pretty old for a guy that's still to be on his rookie contract. I think he's going into his age 27 season. So while I'll be hesitant on giving him that 5th year, I think he'll be topping out at 32 if that was the case. This is a guy that's been nothing but short of what you expected, or everything you expected and more. We have to remember, this is a guy that we brought in to be a special teams gunner. And then this is a guy that has taken that expectation and become one of the best wide receivers in the NFL with garbage quarterback play. I mean, has Dwayne played with a good quarterback? I mean, you want to give him Alex Smith, but he was playing with a broken Alex Smith. I mean, has Terry played with a good quarterback? So, I mean, this is a guy that's put up comparable numbers to guys that are looking for, 24, 25 million a year. I know DK Metcalf is in a contract situation as well. And I think that Terry McLaurin has put up, 60 or 100 career less receiving yards than a guy like DK Metcalf. But this is a guy that played with Russell Wilson compared to the garbage that Terry McLaurin has played. So I think that he's worth every penny. So like I said, I'm giving him around like a 4-year, $96 million deal. I think that tops him around $24 million. If he says no, I might slide in that 25 million and put him around 4 years, 100 million. But yeah, I got to keep my elite blue chip players here because we don't have many. We don't have many at all.
Yeah, and on your Alex Smith point, I think we got to be honest with ourselves. Even when Alex Smith was healthy for us in 2018, it was the defense and running game, underrated, performance by Adrian Peterson. Defense and running game that sort of led the way. So, I mean, yeah, I agree with you. He hasn't really had much to work with at the quarterback position. But I guess with this constant discussion around Terry McLaurin and whether he's going to resign here in DC, I don't know if you got a chance to see this, but Dan Orlovsky of ESPN suggested that the Commanders, I think it was the Commanders and the Jets were the two teams that should go after DK Metcalf this offseason. Do you have thoughts on that?
I mean, I like DK as a player, and I mean, ultimately, I think Terry McLaurin's a better player. So I think that you need to pay the better player that's in your organization first. Like I said, DK Metcalf is ultimately going to be looking for a big deal as well. So what are we going to have, 50 million tied up into receivers when you're giving Carson Wentz 28 million, and then we're expecting to be paying all these dogs on the defensive line as well? I don't think it can happen. So I think Dan was just talking out of fantasy land on that one. Not really what I know a lot of people say the cap is a myth, but the cap is a real thing. I know it can be worked around, but I don't know if we got 50 million tied up and be paying Chase Young and be paying Montez Sweat and be paying Jonathan Allen and things like that.
Yeah, see, honestly, like if we had the type of if we had a Deshaun Watson here in DC, right? Like a Deshaun Watson caliber of quarterback, then honestly, I would be all for pushing all your cards in and going for a DK Metcalf, doing what the Rams are doing, right? When you got a quarterback that you can actually truly win with, right? Because the jury's still out on Carson Wentz, at least here in DC, and whether he can go back to his 2017, 2018 form. But if we had like a Deshaun Watson or that type of quarterback or a Matt Stafford, I would probably agree with Orlovsky. But with us having a Carson Wentz and us not knowing if he's the long-term solution, I agree with you. I think we probably shouldn't go after DK Metcalf. That's too much money locked up to the receiver position. Uptown Dre, the organization's probably waiting after the draft in June to cut Collins and to re-sign Terry. Not a wise move, but that is what they do. I think we re-signed Jonathan Allen in July last year.
I think it was the day before camp last year.
Yeah, so I mean, and I think even John Keim talked about how, like, you know, we shouldn't be too worried. Like, they'll probably re-sign him in July or August. So you think it'll be a later offseason signing?
I love this comment because, like I said, I actually think it's true. I think that we are waiting for the post June 1 cut to get that Collins hit off the cap. But like I agree, this isn't a wise move, but this is a move that you have to do when you're paying, you know, a guy like Carson Wentz $28 million. You have to wait for that big cap hit to come off the books. This is a move that I don't think that we should have set ourselves up for, and I don't think it's a wise move. So I agree with Uptown Dre 100%. Great comment. But yeah, I agree with him as well. I think that it is going to happen post June 1.
Okay. And back to whether this team really improved this offseason. So I asked Rio this, I asked Ted, I asked Ed, I asked Louis T. How much of an upgrade do you think Carson Wentz is over Taylor Heineke? Because again, I think we can all agree that he's an upgrade. But do you think he's enough of an upgrade to get us to 10, 11 wins and a playoff berth and maybe even winning our first playoff game in a long time? Do you think he's that type of quarterback?
If we're measuring it on games won, I just like to give some context because I do. And while I don't think that Carson Wentz is the greatest quarterback, we got to remember that while I hate to use it as an excuse, we won 7 games with the COVID-ravaged season, and we were playing a number 1 schedule in you know, the NFC East. Now we're playing arguably one of the easiest schedules in the entire NFL. So with that, you know, improvement at quarterback, you should be able to – it's some games, and I know the NFL doesn't work out like that, but it's some games later in that year, if we're thinking we're as good as we think we're going to be, that you should be able to pencil in as a win. And I don't think there were many games like that in the 2021 season at all. So I think that, you know, with him being able to, you know, push the ball down vertically, stretch the field, utilize our speed on our offense, I think that he can, you know, I think 10 is the cap. So maybe 10-7, but I think he can, you know, win you 2 or 3 more games than a guy like Taylor Heineke.
Okay. So look, I'm not the biggest of Taylor Heineke fans, right? Like, I obviously know he has his limitations. We all talk about his noodle arm and stuff. And, you know, we all love the energy, but there's only so much you can do with that frame. But at the same time, I think what you mentioned, your point right there, it could also be used to, like, counter, like, what you just said, in the sense that, like, we won 7 games, even with all those things happening. Taylor Heineke was our quarterback. We won 7 games. Last year, Carson Wentz was on an Indianapolis Colts team that going into the season, a lot of people thought was potentially going to make a playoff run. Like, they had that stacked of a roster. And I get that they had injuries along their offensive line, but they still had the leading rusher in the NFL, Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman Jr., who isn't Terry, but he's a pretty capable receiver. They had although their defense is not as talented as ours, I mean, in terms of, like, where they ranked, I think they were 8th in, like, rushing yards per game or points. I think it's points, actually. They were 8th in points allowed. They had a pretty good defense last year, and they only won 9 games, right? Like, so I guess, like, what do you make of that? Like, do you think we could see more of middle of the season 2021 Carson Wentz when they went on a hot streak after, you know, starting off slow? Or do you think we'll see more of what we saw at the beginning of the season and towards the tail end when Carson Wentz really wet the bed?
Like I said, I like providing context with everything. And while I'm not the biggest Carson Wentz advocate at all, that Colts team had its fair share of limitations as well. I mean, while the numbers grade out as Jonathan Taylor being such a great rusher, so you're thinking that offensive line is great with a guy like Quentin Nelson. But I watched those games. They have their fair share of, you know, pass blocking struggles. And a guy like Carson Wentz, who likes to stay in the pocket, I mean, that is his play style. I don't think that it was beneficial with a line that was shaky. You tend to see when they were losing games, that's when, you know, the offense wasn't healthy. Their offensive line wasn't healthy. You know, they were mismatching guys And then I know Ryan Kelly had his fair share of injuries. I know Quentin Nelson had his fair share of injuries. And like you said, I'm a big Michael Pittman fan, but there's a gap between him and a guy like Terry McLaurin. There's definitely a gap there. And while we think that Carson, well, like I said, I'm not the biggest advocate for Carson Wentz. The Jacksonville Jaguars have had the Colts number in Jacksonville since 2014. They haven't beat them there. So is that a Carson Wentz issue? Or is that an Indianapolis Colts issue? Is that a fundamental organization issue?
I feel like it's both though.
Huh?
With it being at the end of the season with playoff implications on the line, I feel like it's both a Colts issue and a Carson Wentz issue because Carson Wentz didn't help that team.
But what everybody else seems to forget is they had 2 opportunities to win that game, and they lost the shootout against Oakland where he didn't play that bad. And was that one Carson Wentz's fault, or did the defense let Oakland put up 30 points on them in a must-win game, in a game that they didn't that Jacksonville game shouldn't have been a factor. They should have got their business done. Oakland was fighting for a playoff berth as well. Oakland wanted it more ultimately, and it wasn't just Carson. That whole team. Tucked their tail between their legs and walked away.
That's fair. I don't know.
Listen, I'm not the biggest advocate for Carson, but that Indianapolis Colts team, I just think a lot of people have talked like they're better than what they are. But that team had their fair share of flaws. I mean, Jonathan Taylor was a stud, and Carson did ride on that a lot. But I mean, what weapons did he really have? I mean, are we talking about a washed T.Y. Hilton? Or, we're talking about a Michael Pittman who essentially wasn't good until Carson Wentz gave him there. So, are you going to give his development to a guy like Carson Wentz, the development of Michael Pittman? So, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I get that. I don't know. Like Carson Wentz, obviously we all know he has the talent. I mean, David DC mentioned here, 6'6", dude, big arm, can pass it over a 5-yard pass. Unlike Taylor Heineke at times this past season. But for me, like, I guess what I'm really worried about is like what's between the ears. I get that Carson Wentz has all the tools that you want out of a franchise quarterback, but with him being traded twice within a year now, and all this talk about he doesn't mesh well with teammates, and and then you saw what happened at tail end of the season. Like, I know everybody loves to throw Irsay under the bus because of his past and stuff, using drugs and his problematic behavior, but I feel like there is some truth to you being at that point they were 9-6, right? 9-6, 2 opportunities to get into the playoffs. You lose both of those opportunities. And I think in both of those games, Carson Wentz had under 200 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interception type games, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, I think was the last game. Am I the only one that's worried here? I guess is the question.
No, like I said, I have worries as well. I think my 2 biggest worries are the locker room, his character issues, because I think a lot of people are as fans, I think we downplay the psychological aspect of sports as well. Team camaraderie is a real thing. So the locker room and the characteristic issues, I think that's one of my biggest concerns. And I know you talked about, what's in between, his brain and things like that. But my second biggest concern would probably be the injury history. I should have touched on when I was talking about, the Colts season. This is a guy that played on 2 sprained ankles for majority of the season since week 2. But we also forget, didn't he have a foot injury in training camp as well?
Yep.
So he was basically playing with, nimble lower body extremity injuries all season long. And a guy like Carson, since we brought him in, I've been trying to convince myself and talk myself up. While I don't ever expect him to regain that 2017 form, I understand why he plays like he does. When he was at his best, he was sitting in the pocket. But guess what? And I think this is where I've come to the conclusion. I think he's suffering from a little bit of damaged goods, is because if you look at him during those times before the injuries, Carson had wheels. Carson was getting out of the pocket. He was escaping, but he was able to. He was sitting in the pocket, and that was allowing him to extend plays and things like that. And I think that he hasn't gotten that out of his head, because I don't think that he's honestly as fast as he was back then. And I think he's thinking I'm still a young guy. I'm able to get away from these defenders and things like that. But dude, with all those, you got an ACL, you got 2 ankles, you got a foot. You shouldn't be expected to be the same speed that you were 5-6 years ago.
Yeah. Patrick West here, worried and hopeful. Uptown Dre. I will say this: the fact that our schedule definitely eases up from what it was last year. I think we had the toughest schedule last year. Now we have the projected easiest schedule this year. I think that will definitely help things, especially at the beginning of the season. But before getting into the draft talk, just general question here: like, what do you think are still, what do you view as the problem areas still on this team as we head into the NFL draft?
I think we need a middle linebacker for sure. I think that's our biggest area of need. While I'm not saying to draft one in the first round because I'm big on positional value in the draft and things like that, and I don't think you draft an on-ball linebacker 2 years in a off-ball linebacker 2 years in a row. I think we need a middle linebacker. I think we need another cornerback. I think we need some defensive tackle depth. I know a lot of people are clamoring for wide receiver at 11. I think we're going to touch base on it. So I'm not going to go on it too much. But, I mean, I don't know if that's the first pick. I do think we need another weapon at receiver in the draft. But I don't know if that's going to be our pick at 11. And trust me, if you listen to any of our episodes, nobody has been higher on De'Ami Brown than us. That man De'Ami Brown be out there running around. We made our own slogan. But I mean, I think that they do want to give him a chance, and we forget we spent a 3rd round draft pick on him. That's the same round we spent on Terry, so that is high draft capital. So do we want to go that high at 11 for another receiver to push him down the depth chart? I'm not sure.
And what about the depth at offensive line and defensive line? With you said. See, I don't know if you know this. I am sort of a Vernon Sheriff fan, Stan, whatever you want to call. And I'll accept what you said, right? That he's missed a lot of games and it's time to move forward. But I think we replaced Eric Flowers. I don't think we replaced Brandon Sheriff adequately, in my opinion. Do you think we need to, and also Matt Ioannidis, Tim Settle, obviously gone on the defensive line. So do you think offensive line depth and defensive line depth are probably areas of focus maybe in the later rounds of the draft?
It can be. I'm a big Wes Schweitzer fan, though. I think he plays with a nasty streak. I think that, we've seen him fill in for Sheriff. Sheriff would miss 6 games this year. I think he missed around 8 last year with the chest injury, or 10 last year. I think it was 16. It was between the last 2 years. And I loved him when he filled in. Now, I know that was a part-time role, but this is honestly a make or break year for a guy like Sadiq Charles. Is he a swing guard? Is he a swing tackle? Is he somebody, if you have a guy that can play off with 4 to 5 offensive line positions, this is a guy that can essentially fill in for 2 people. So I'm not too concerned about the offensive line depth, while I do think there is going to be some drop-off from Sheriff. If you have 5 adequate players along the offensive line, that's how I think, with the salary cap and things like that, that's how I think the best or most efficient offensive lines are built. But the defensive tackle depth does concern me, because after John Allen and Deron Payne, who do you have? Yeah. And are you relying on those guys to play 90 snaps, 70 snaps a game? Because they can't do it. And that's no shade to them. I don't expect any defensive tackle to play 70 snaps a game in today's NFL. So, I wouldn't mind getting a big, ugly, somebody that's bigger than them, a 330 to 350 pound run stopper. I know that's not typical for the 4-3, but just somebody that can stop the run so that we can rotate, John Allen, who's become a hell of a pass rusher from the interior. And hopefully Deron Payne can regain some of that interior pass rush form that he had in his rookie year, where I think he had 5 sacks.
Yeah. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Payne is heading into his contract year, right?
Yeah, he is heading into his
contract. I think that's, yeah. So he needs to step up. He
wants to be on the field as many snaps as possible.
Yeah. Totally get that. And Boski here, real talk, I think he's on administrative leave still, right?
Do we have one? I don't think we have one.
I don't know. We heard about the raid, I think it was October? Right before. Yeah, it was and nothing since.
That man disappeared off the face of the earth.
Yeah. But the last thing I heard was Rivera still sticking by his guy, but I guess it is what it is. We'll get to the draft talk now, the most exciting part of the stream. So, Jalen, I think I sent you the last video, the number 1 option, the best option, in my opinion, for the Washington Commanders at pick 11. And I said it was Kyle Hamilton. And essentially finished up a 3-part series where I thought the third guy was Derek Stingley, who I know you're super high on. I watched Rio and your stream yesterday or video, and we'll get to your thoughts there. But Derek Stingley was my number 3. My number 2 was Jamison Williams, and my number 1 was Kyle Hamilton. So first off, let's get to this question first, because I know Rio has some strong thoughts on this, but should we even draft defense? Should defense even be a consideration in round 1 for us?
Yeah, you draft the best player available at all times. I'm a big proponent of that. And if Kyle Hamilton is there at 11, I don't care what receiver is on the board. While Garrett Wilson will be a hard pass, he's my wide receiver 1. I know you're a big Jameson Williams guy. I mean, he's very good. Don't get me wrong. He's a dog as well. If Kyle Hamilton is there at 11, there's no reason he should be there. We should be sprinting faster than his 40 time to the podium now.
Okay. So in terms of the wide receiver ranking, though, would you put Garrett Wilson at like number 1, Olave 2, Jameson 3, or Drake London somewhere? Yeah.
Oh no. We have some controversial wide receiver rankings over at Bleeding BMZ. So Garrett Wilson is our wide receiver 1. He reminds me of Odell Beckham Jr. so much. The body control, the shiftiness. Not the most refined route runner, but the suddenness, he can get there to be dominant, and he's already there at the catch point, leaping over guys at 6 feet. Odell was mossing dudes at 5'11". So he reminds me of prime Odell Beckham a lot. Jameson Williams is our wide receiver too. Speed demon. Speed. I do think he'll have some trouble getting off of press in the league, kind of like Devontae Smith, his Alabama brother. But when you're running 4-2, they're going to find a way to get you open in the league. Yeah, they're going to find a way to get you open in the league. At wide receiver 3, though, we're big George Pickens guys over here. Yeah, we're big George Pickens guys. I think that this guy was better than all these dudes when he was healthy. And a lot of people have talked about his injury, I think, I don't know if this is delusion. I don't know what to call it, but this is a guy that got hurt in the spring but came back before the end of the season. This is freakish type of recovery to me, and I feel like we hopping on his injury, but it wasn't like he came back and was a bum. He was impactful in the national championship game. I know we all can remember that, flipping one-handed catch that he had against Alabama. And like I said, this is a dude that if he left after his freshman year, he would have been a top 10 pick easily. The same with Derek Stingley, and that's my argument for Derek Stingley as well. I don't think that the talent just evaporated. I don't think they just touched, a Space Jam ball and all their talents and powers just left. I know a lot of people don't have George Pickens anywhere near the top 5, but he's our wide receiver 3. Drake London, wide receiver 4, and then Chris Olave, wide receiver 5. While a lot of people like Olave, and I'm pretty sure we're going to touch on it, I just think that he's weak at the catch point. Very, very good route runner, but I'm really concerned about his physicality, and I think that's an underrated aspect that people don't really look at in the receiver position in the NFL. Look at a guy like Jamar Chase. He's uber physical, and I think that allowed him to dominate as a rookie. Okay.
What about I know the last couple of weeks people in the chat have talked about this guy, but I think Christian Watson from North Dakota State. You got thoughts on him? Where he ranks?
Freak athlete, but that 30% drop rate concerns me. I think it's like 28.6%. But when I look at him on film, like this dude flies around and like he's tall. He looks like the ideal prospect. He looks like wide receiver 1. This dude is 6'4". They're using him on jet sweeps and things like that. And I'm not one to knock, competition all the way. North Dakota State produces football players. And the fact that he was the man on that team last year, I think that bodes well. But that drop rate does concern me. But uber freakish athlete, probably the most athletic receiver prospect in terms of everything in this draft. Height, weight, speed specimen for sure.
Okay. And back to the Jameson Williams stuff. So I mentioned this in the video, but there was an NFL.com article, I think this was last month, if I'm not mistaken, that reported that Jameson Williams' injury timetable from when he sustained the torn ACL in the national championship game, for some reason, was only 5 to 7 months, and he's reportedly ahead of schedule. Do you think his injury concerns are a little overblown, especially with, I think it was JPA Football who said that he potentially he's getting some top 10 talk among NFL league circles right now, even with the injury. Like, do you think his injury concerns are a little overblown?
Absolutely, and I mean, and just in my last talking point, like I said, we're big George Pickens fans, and I think that a lot of people, honestly, I don't know if it's been overblown because I think that a lot of people think that or projected that Jamison Williams can bounce back. I don't know if it'll be this season, but I think that a lot of people have projected him to be the same guy running forward too. In my case, when I was making my case for my wide receiver rankings, is why can't we think the same for a guy like George Pickens? I think that sometimes. We overrate these injuries. I know it has spurred Washington in the past with a guy like Darius Geis and things like that. But sometimes, these guys, you just the talent levels out. Like the talent is the ultimatum at the end of the day. And I think those are two guys, Jameson Williams and George Pickens, where I think the talent overshadows any type of injury history they have.
Yeah. David DC here. So both of our guys, Wilson and Williams, could develop to receiver one over time. Either would be great. I think Olave would be great for the collection of talent on the team. Yeah, I mean, any of these receivers honestly would be great at pick 11. But I think we're in agreement that if Kyle Hamilton falls to 11, I mean, you probably have to pick him, right?
It'll be hard if Derek Stingley is there as well. Because I do think that shutdown corner is like out of the top three most important positions that you can have in the NFL. I think that shutdown corner, wherever you want to rank it, 1, 2, or 3, I think it's in the top three firmly. But I mean, in terms of the play, I think I give Kyle Hamilton a slight edge over Derek Stingley. I think both of them can be generational type talents, and I don't throw that word around loosely. But these are both like top 10 prospects throughout high school that a lot of people are seeming to doubt throughout the draft process, which is weird because they've been good for way more than a lot of people have been thinking they've been bad. Kyle Hamilton, but it would be hard to pass up on Derek Stingley or a guy like Garrett Wilson as well.
Yeah, and like with Kyle Hamilton, also mentioned this in the video, but everybody talks about his speed, right? Like, oh, he ran a 4.59 at the combine. I think it was a 4.7 at the pro day, but the 4.59 thing, right? I mean, Tyrann Mathieu ran a 4.51. Sean Taylor ran a 4.51, and he's about the same frame as.
I was about to say, Tyrann Mathieu ran at 5 inches shorter and 40 pounds less. Like exactly. I was about to say the same thing. Some guys that they killed this combine and things like that, and I'm just like, it's a lot of narratives that's pushed with the NFL draft, and I think that some team in the top 10 is hoping that Kyle Hamilton falls. I honestly think they would want to put out that 4.7 news. Because I have a hard time seeing him run a 4.7. And that was reported on Twitter and things like that. But yeah, Kyle Hamilton is that dude. If you've been watching film, if you've been watching football, anybody that I've heard say Kyle Hamilton isn't good hasn't watched a full Notre Dame game or hasn't watched him play. They just watch highlights. So
I mean, the instincts, the athleticism, it's like all there.
And money backer, like I said, I'm big on positional value. And while I'm not big on drafting a traditional off-ball backer, money backer is like them Isaiah Simmonses of the world. Those guys that you want to play all over the field at the second and the third level. That's an important piece of modern NFL defenses.
This is a good question, though, because, I mean, Del Rio – he was pretty sketchy last year. I mean, this defense didn't really get going until the second half. And funny enough, it's when we started to get a bunch of injuries. But do you think he'll know how to use Hamilton?
He figured out what to do with Landon Collins. Granted, it was late, but he figured out what to do with Landon Collins. And if you put Hamilton in that same role, he'll give you all pro type of – if you put him in that same role – that money backer, that guy that's transitioning from the second and third role, a guy that's shooting gaps, a guy that's playing coverage in the middle of the field. I'm telling you now, he covers better than Landon Collins. I think that he has better instinct. And if we're being honest, Landon Collins wasn't running much faster than a 4.7 last year either. So, let's call a spade a spade. So if he gives Kyle Hamilton that newfound Landon Collins role, with Landon Collins out of the mix now, I'm telling you, we got a potential all-pro as a rookie, like a Michael Parsons type impact. I'm telling you that now.
The part that I'm most excited to talk to you about, just watching you and Rio's video yesterday, because I think we're 1,000% on the same wavelength when it comes to this. But Derek Stingley, I mean, you kind of touched on him a little bit earlier, but how great do you think he's going to be on the next level? Because I always love to talk him up on these weekly live streams, but everybody loves to talk about Sauce Gardner and how special of a talent he is. Rehash everything you said yesterday about.
Man, it was killing me in this comment, so I don't care. I'm gonna bring it back. I mean, two great players, but I just think like I said, like Meek Mill said, it's levels to this. Darian Stingley is the guy that held your favorite receiver in solitary confinement as a freshman. He probably had some of the best freshman tape I've watched in the history of football. I'm talking about Jerry Jeudy. I'm talking about Jalen Waddle. I'm talking about George Pickens. Anybody that you want to name, he locked them up as an 18-year-old, right? And, I mean, there were reports coming out that he was locking up Justin Jefferson and Jamar.
I was just about to say.
Who were two of the best rookie receivers to come out over the course of the last 2 years as an 18-year-old. I mean, I don't think they were made-believe reports. I don't think they were hyping up the freshmen against these two dogs that would come out into the NFL. So this is a guy that has the hip mobility, the feet, the footwork, the strength, the size. I think that a lot of his play, and this is my biggest concern, a lot of his downplay and over the course of the last 2 years, even with the injury and things like that, I think he bought into the hype. They gave him that number 7 at LSU, and rightfully so. And if you know about college football history, if you get that number 7, you got to be a dog.
Special.
And like I said, I think that he really thought he was going to be Patrick Peterson. And, coming, it's about 10, 11, 12 years now. But Patrick Peterson was a guy that was playing at 6'1", 221 pounds. And I think that Stingley was a guy that came in a little overweight. I'm glad to see that he came in around 195 pounds at the combine. I think that he can play around 205. I think that's his most ideal playing weight. This is a guy that can be a bully. This is a guy that can play finesse. Like I said, I think his player comp is like a Marshawn Lattimore or souped up Denzel Ward with the hip flexibility, with the feet and things like that. I also see some technician-like tendencies when he's on his game, like a Stephon Gilmore. So, Sauce is a great player, but I think Sauce is too reliant on his athletic gifts. I've seen too many, and this is something that I should have talked about last on the episode with Rio. I've just seen too many handsy wide receivers, handsy cornerbacks in college get exposed in the NFL. Think of a guy like D. Milner. Think of a guy like Morris Claiborne. These are guys that, they were praised for their long arms and their physicality, but they were burnt toast when they got to the league. And I'm not saying that Sauce will be that guy, but when you rely on more of, your arms, your wingspans, rather than your feet and your hips as a DB, I think that can be trouble coming for sure.
Yeah, and you talked about last night how for as great of a performance, Sauce Gardner had last year for Cincinnati, how great of a player he was, it's very hard, and even Sauce could not reach that 2019 level.
Them dudes was playing in the AAC, man. No,
exactly.
AAC, but I mean, they were playing against Miami of Ohio, and a lot of people, they were mentioning me. They were like, well, Sauce was locking up Jamison Williams. No, Nick Saban is a genius. Like, they knew that Cincinnati couldn't stop the run, so they ran the ball 90% of the game. I don't think that Sauce was over there locking Jamison Williams up and having him in solitary confinement. Now, like I said, I don't think Sauce is a bad player. And if you're a first-round cornerback like I expect you to be, I don't expect you to give up too many touchdowns in the American Athletic Conference. I don't. Not playing Miami of Ohio and Kent State. Nah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, and for people who might think you misspoke, no, it's not the ACC, it's the AAC. So
don't correct me in the comments. I just let it be. Man.
Yeah, no. I mean, a couple things with this. So again, I am in full agreement with you. I know we have to go back a couple years to the 2019 tape, but it's so rare for a freshman cornerback, to not just be a shutdown guy, but to also have 6 interceptions in his freshman year. 6 interceptions. The few times that he was targeted, he intercepted the ball. That's how elite, that's how special of a player he was in his freshman year. I remember reading a Bleacher Report article. I think this was right after they won the national championship, talking about how Derek Stingley, when he comes out, he might be the number 1 overall pick in the draft, in the 2022 draft.
Year, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I agree with you. He sort of bought into the hype a little bit, and the injuries definitely don't help. But I think he's fully healthy now, if not going to be fully healthy by the draft. And I think he would be an absolute home run pick at 13. I will say this, though. You mentioned Pat P. I think the perfect fit might be the Vikings, because Pat P's still playing, although he's older. and you could take him under his wings.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't mind that as well. What did they at? Pick 12? They're right behind us.
I think right up.
We had to pass up on them, but yeah, I wouldn't mind that.
Yeah.
Stingley to the Vikings at all.
Yeah. We're pick 11. I think they're pick 12. So yeah, but the other question that I wanted to ask you, so I think it was, you kind of already touched on this, but up to Andre, so you have to give me one guy, Jalen. Wilson, Hamilton, Stingley at 11. Dream scenario. Who are you picking?
Sheesh. I'm using all 10 minutes. I'm using all 10 minutes on the clock. Okay. Because I do think that Garrett Wilson can be special. And if you're going to be investing in a guy like Carson Wentz, because and it hasn't been much talk, but there's a realistic expectation that he's expected to be here longer than just this year. So if you're planning to invest in him, which Ron said in his new league year office meeting, like that was his first thing that came out when they were talking about priority in the draft, was getting weapons around Carson Wentz. If Wilson is there, I think that'll be a hard pass. But ultimately, Kyle Hamilton is Kyle. Yeah.
He's arguably the best player overall in this draft.
He feels like 6 of your needs. Like, I know they're talking about, no, the middle linebacker isn't as important. We need a Buffalo nickel. Well, Kyle Hamilton can pay that. Well, guess what? You need to cover a tight end. You need somebody in the second level of defense playing that essential middle linebacker role in passing situations. Kyle Hamilton can play that. This is a guy who I think is better as a 2-high safety, but I mean, he can play, in a cover 3 scheme, cover 4 scheme. This is a guy who's scheme versatile. He's a freak, man. I don't care about a 40 time. He's a dog.
Yeah, I agree with you. Kyle Hamilton will probably be my guy. I will just say this, though, in terms of what I think the team will do, and, I'll probably talk about this with the clip that I'll send to Rio, but I don't know. I think it's definitely going to be one of the Ohio State receivers. I think the connection is too strong. Like all the talk, all the rumors, Ron Rivera visiting, making a beeline. I think it was for Chris Olave at the pro day. Like, I feel like it's going to be one of the Ohio State receivers. And it might be Chris Olave, but I think we both agree, though, that if it was up to us, Kyle Hamilton will be the guy.
I'll tell you one thing, and I know a lot of people have been like, if we get either of the Ohio State receivers, if Garrett Wilson is on that board and we pass on Garrett Wilson for Chris Olave, that's one scenario where I'll be ticked off. I think there's a clear difference in the type of player that they're projected to be in the NFL level. And if we're just drafting Chris Olave based off just his relationship with Terry, because a guy like Garrett Wilson didn't play with Terry at Ohio State, he didn't stay a gazillion years like Chris Olave did. That'll be one scenario. While I don't mind Chris Olave as a player, I don't think that he'll be, I don't think he can cap out as, potential top 7 receiver in the league. Like that's the type of potential I think that Garrett Wilson has.
Okay. And really quickly, in the last about 10 minutes-ish that we have, give me some guys in the second round. This is sort of going to be, jumbled all over the place. But second round, later round guys that, we might be looking for, that you want us to look after, and maybe even some under-the-radar guys that are not really talked about in terms of their connection to this team right now.
Second round, I wouldn't mind looking at the running backs. I don't mind. I don't think Antonio Gibson is a bum by any means. I don't think that he's just a natural runner. I think that he looks like a receiver that you guys have forced to play running back. I think that he's picked up weight, so he doesn't play to his 4.3 speed, and not necessarily good weight. So he's playing around. He's looking like he's around 230, 240 pounds because he's not a short guy. This guy's about 6'2". So he's looking like he's around 230, 240 pounds and not playing to that 4.3 speed. So looking at a guy like Kenneth Walker or Breece Hall, not to take go ahead.
Which one? Because I know Rio and I talk about this. But
for Washington, I would probably say Breece, because he's the more natural runner and he's the more like bruiser of the backs. And I think that, he can give you that punishment that, sometimes where Antonio Gibson isn't getting every yard that's expected. He's the more, like I said, he's the more efficient runner, and I think that that's what Washington needs. I think you got JD that can give you what you need in the passing game, and we can potentially use Antonio Gibson more in the passing game, which he was used at in college. So I wouldn't mind, those running backs. I like a guy like Leo Chenal out of Wisconsin, the linebacker. I think that he can be our Mike of the future. I like Darian Beavers. I think that he can be around in the third or fourth linebacker out of Cincinnati. Who else? Who else do I like? If George Pickens is there to fall in the second round, I like Jahan Dotson as well. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of a lot of these guys. Nick Cross, I think he's a guy that can play all three safety positions. I'm including the Buffalo nickel. This is a freak athlete, and something that's underrated. If we look, all Maryland guys test amazingly at the combine. Darnell Savage, I think they're running their little height, weight, speed specimen program over there as well. But I mean, I like Nick Cross as well. Jelani Woods. Jelani Woods is my guy, tight end out of Virginia. I think that he may be around. I think we may need to get like a third round pick if we don't want to reach for him in the second. I don't know if he's going to be there in the fourth, but this is a guy 6'7". He looks like a tight end out there in the slot. I mean, he looks like an offensive tackle out there in the slot. And this is a guy that was recruited to be a quarterback. He went into Oklahoma State playing a quarterback position at 6'5", and then he blew up. I think he had like 50 pounds. Now he's about 260 pounds. And if we're looking at a guy like Logan Thomas, who is projected to maybe miss the first month of the year, this is a guy, Jelani Woods, that can follow in the same lines of, Logan Thomas, a former quarterback. And I remember, I don't know who the video is, but I want to give him his credit. But they were breaking down, Logan Thomas's year in 2020 here, and they were saying that Logan Thomas essentially runs all choice and option routes, but his smarts and allowing him to read the defense, playing that quarterback position, allows him to excel in a Scott Turner type offense. And I think, Jelani Woods exuding those same type of smarts as a former quarterback. I think that he can be a guy that can be, not only impactful later down the line, but as a rookie as well.
Okay. I definitely agree with you on Jelani Woods and the linebackers. I think even Chad Muma in the second might be a guy that we might look after.
How you feel about Troy Anderson?
Troy Anderson, I like him as well from Montana State. You think second round pick though might be too rich? Like I would think a third round pick is ideal, but we don't have one. So it's
the only reason that he's stuck out to me is, I mean, he's posted freakish numbers, but this is a coach that's talked about positional flex, and this is a guy that's played 10 positions over the course of his college career. And I don't know if it's in the case of good at all traits, master of none. But this is a guy that, I mean, my thing is, I think that it was coaching malpractice with a guy like Jamin Davis last year. I don't think he should have ever been brought in and expected to be a downhill linebacker. So I don't know I don't know if I trust, two former linebackers in their eye at the linebacker position. So I don't know. I don't know if they think that, with his Troy Anderson speaking with his athletic traits, they can turn him into something. But he is a specimen for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And you said potentially Pickens in the second. I don't know if you saw Mel Kiper projected that we get Kyle Hamilton at 11, George Pickens at 47. That would be perfect. That would be perfect.
I got a bet going that George Pickens doesn't make it outside the first round though. So hopefully Hawk is wrong.
Yeah, for sure. And I asked you about Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker because, man, I'm a Breece Hall fan. I think, in terms of athletic ability, I don't know if you saw the tweet that I sent out, I think it was last week, but his traits are very similar to Jonathan Taylor. 4.39 speed, pretty much the same size.
Yep.
Exactly. I don't think they run the same way, but in terms of like all the athletic traits and everything, it's all there. So I think even though Kenneth Walker was a better college rusher than Breece Hall, I think Breece Hall will end up being the better pro runner than Kenneth Walker.
And ultimately, the reason Jonathan Taylor wasn't drafted high is because what he didn't do in the receiving game. The same thing that be with Breece Hall, but I mean, a lot of teams are kicking themselves in the butt over, passing up with Jonathan Taylor. So it'll be the same thing with Breece.
For sure. And one other guy that I'll mention here that I don't think anybody's talking about, but just someone maybe a 4th round, 5th round pick we could go after from Fayetteville State, HBCU, cornerback Joshua Williams. He's 6'3", 197, ran a 4.46 time at his pro day. Freakish athletic prototype, has wide receiver roots as well. I think it was his dad or somebody in his family played receiver. And can run to the ball effortlessly. Was great in the Senior Bowl practices as well, which we've seen, right? Guys that show up in the Senior Bowl that hold their own. oftentimes produce the best when it comes to the NFL. So just a guy, a late find that potentially we could go after. But I think in terms of the other picks, I'm in agreement with you.
Oh, HBCU, as a product of an HBCU myself, I'm a huge advocate of that pick,
For sure. And I guess the last question I want to ask you, Jalen, thank you so much, bro, again for spending time with me tonight. The last question I want to ask you is, where do you believe this Commanders team stands right now in the NFC East? And I mean, we talked about Super Bowls, but how far is this team off from competing for one?
Competing or winning one?
Winning one.
Winning one. I think we're a little ways away, but I think that we can make the playoffs this year. I'm not going to rank us in the division because I think that this is going to be a tough division this year, as opposed to the last couple of years. I think that the schedules balance out. I think that the better teams have the harder schedules, which wasn't necessarily the case last year. We had the number one. We had the number one schedule, but I wouldn't necessarily thought we were the best team going into the season, especially with a guy like Dak Prescott coming back and things like that. I think that it's more even this year. So like I said earlier, I think that we can cap out around 10 wins. I think that can be good enough to get us a playoff berth. I don't know how deep we go into the playoffs. Maybe the divisional round, something that we haven't seen since 2005. But I think that if the defense plays up to their potential, I have my Chase Young jersey on. It's his birthday today, so shout out to my guy Chase. So if he's able to play like the generational freakish type talent, because we forget, football is a team sport, but one guy can change, the game, can change the side of the ball. We see what Myles Garrett does with the Cleveland Browns. We see what T.J. Watt does with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And we see what Nick Bosa does coming off of ACL with the San Francisco 49ers. So if Chase Young is able to regain that form and be the dog that I know he can be, and he seems super locked in. The man posted a workout picture for his birthday. I was like, oh, yeah. Because he's another guy that bought into that hype. I'm like, nah, he's not listening to none of that noise anymore. So if he can be the Chase Young we expect, the face of the franchise, and Terry McLaurin continues to excel with even better quarterback play, I think those two guys can lead you to a playoff berth for sure.
Yeah, I think he might be, a tad bit insecure with all the talk about, him underwhelming last year. I feel like that kind of
rightfully so. I mean, all the criticism that he had was rightfully deserved. Like Chase looked like he wasn't working hard enough last year in the offseason. He looked like a guy that shouldn't have been missing OTAs because it showed.
Yeah. But I think we can all agree that we want this man. I mean, he's a hometown like PG County, literally grew up right outside the stadium. Like we all want him to be that X factor for us on this team. Right now, people like to call me the Debbie Downer. I got us at 9 wins, but if we knock the draft out of the park, we hit a home run, I think we can get to that 10, 11 win mark that a lot of people project right now.
Not to cut you off, what's a home run? What's a home run pick at 11 for you? Kyle Hamilton, right?
Kyle Hamilton for sure. And then a receiver in the second. That would be my my home run. But and then I see Dave in DC. I guess this was the last question that was here. What do you think about getting Christian Harris? He's my dark horse in the second. You have thoughts on that?
I like Christian Harris. I don't know if he's a Mike, though. I think that's what we need. I think we spent too many years trying to put Holcomb at the mic, trying to put Davis at the mic when, respectively, I think those are Will and Sam linebackers. So I think we have everybody except the Mike. So I don't think we need to draft another Sam, which I think, Christian Harris will ultimately be in the NFL, which is a strong side linebacker if we don't know what the Sam position is.
Yeah, for sure. Jalen, thank you once again for joining me. And going back to what I said at the beginning, I was a little late, and I appreciate you for hanging in there and for getting this done. Appreciate you so much. And please make sure – no, I'm going to let you go first. Plug all your channels and everything before I go ahead.
Yeah, like I mentioned before, Bleeding BNG, we have our own podcast platform. We're available on all podcast platforms. You can follow us on there. We have our YouTube channel. If you search Bleeding BNG or my name, Jalen Morgan, you'll be able to find us. We have social media pages. Our Twitter handles, our Instagram handles actually in the name at Bleeding BNG, BLEEDING BNG. Like I said, daily content posted. We have highlights from our podcast episodes. We have discussions. We have highlights from the team. We have a lot of content pushed out on our social media pages. Be sure to chop us up on Twitter. Chop it up with us on Twitter as well. Follow us on Twitter at BleedingBNG. Spelling a tad bit different. That one is BLEEDIN BNG. So there's only one G in our Twitter handle. And like I said earlier, we love chopping it up with the social media. The Washington Commanders over on Twitter. They've been at my neck, but they give us some of the best times as well. So be sure to follow us. I would love to, chop it up with you guys sometime.
Yeah, and don't worry, bro. You're right. You're right on Stingley. So all the hate that's coming your way.
Yeah, they was at my neck earlier today. I woke up to people at my neck. I'm like, dang, bro, what I do today?
Yeah, can't take a break. But yeah, Tony at the end. Appreciate you, bro, for stopping, for jumping in, and DC all day. But yeah, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe to the DMVSportsZone channel. We like to post fire content like this as much as possible. Also, go follow our Twitter page at DMVSportsZone, Instagram page, all lowercase DMVSportsZone, and our TikTok at DMVSportsZone as well. And like I said before, I linked Jalen's YouTube page in the description, so it should be pretty easy for you guys to find if you haven't already subbed up. And yeah, with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you guys enjoyed the 3-part series as well that just finished up tonight. And see you on the next one. Peace.